Welcome to the Kelly Healing Project, where we have real conversations about healing, growth, and stepping into your power. I'm Kelly, and I'm so glad you're here. So today I'm joined by Ellie, an AuDHD educator, podcast host, and founder of Ellie AuDHD, where she helps neurodivergent individuals better understand themselves with more compassion and a lot less shame. Through her podcast, AuDHD and Then Some, and her online community of more than 50,000 people, Ellie has become a trusted voice for honest conversations about ADHD, autism, trauma, burnout, masking, relationships, and what everyday neurodivergent life really looks like. Her own journey includes childhood trauma, addiction, domestic violence, and receiving a later diagnosis of both ADHD and autism, experiences that really shaped not only who she is, but also the work she's so compassionate about today. So, in this episode, we're exploring the connection between trauma and neurodivergence, why so many people spend years feeling different without knowing why, the hidden cost of masking, and how self understanding can become one of the most powerful parts of the healing journey. Ellie, welcome to the Kelly Healing Project.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you,
Yes.
Kelly.
Yes, I'm so excited. So, can you tell us a little bit about your story? So, before receiving your diagnosis, what was life like growing up feeling different, but not really knowing why?
So my life's always been different. From like 7, I would have existential crises. From 9,
Mm,
I was looking for God. Like I've always been a really unusual individual. I've never
mm,
fit in with anyone. I've been bullied and
mm,
etc. I actually had an unfortunate traumatic experience throughout my childhood from when I was about 2 till when I was about 5 with childhood sexual
mm,
abuse.
mm,
So I actually thought that all of this came from that. So when I was having these existential crises and I was going through lots of things, I thought, oh, that's obviously, and everyone else thought, oh, my mum was like, that's to be expected. She's gone through a lot. So I didn't really know what was wrong with me. But my dad was very different as well. And we thought maybe that come from some trauma. He grew up in years and years ago, and we thought maybe it was that. But he was very different. It was only when, I have children now that are in their 20s. It was only when I was when I had my children and one by one they all got diagnosed with some kind of neurodivergence or they all appeared to be neurodivergent. I thought actually maybe it's not trauma, maybe it's neurodivergence, because the thing is they sometimes pattern and mirror each other very well. So sometimes the same symptoms that you get with trauma you will get with neurodivergence. So sometimes they can be mistaken for one another. So
mm,
yeah, so that's it. So I found out I was neurodivergent, and then I've had a shockingly shit life. At times,
mm,
it's been crap. I've attracted narcissists. I've been prey to lots of bad people, and I don't know whether that's because I've been through trauma as a child, whether I was neurodivergent, or that's just what was been written for me. But I'm very, very passionate about nobody else going through that anymore, and that's why I wanted to write a book, but my brain doesn't work in a linear fashion. It never has. And I speak a lot, whether or not that's linear is another thing. But I speak a lot. And I thought, you know what? The one thing I want to make for my children is audio files. So that one day they can understand me, after I'm gone and etc. They understand me now, but I feel like I need to offer them something. It's been traumatic. So yeah, so I decided that I would make a podcast, and I only started my community in March. No, 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 I'm lying. It was after my son's 21st. I started it in May, and I already have a support group with, I think, 48,000 people in it on Facebook. My own personal group has 5,000 people. And my podcast is like, I'm being able to guest on the most amazing shows, and I'm having the most amazing guests. And I have people contacting me like, oh my God, Ellie, I feel like I'm just like you. And all my life I've felt like it's just me and I'm weird. And now I know, there's so many weirdos. But I honestly, I'm so happy to be able to like bring people together and use my shit start for so much positive, because I don't want anyone else to be feeling alone for 40 years, whether it's in
Mm.
trauma, neurodivergence, shitty relationships. I don't want anyone else to go through what I've gone through. I'm not going to be able to stop them going through trauma, but I want to be able to be that beacon of light for people that I once needed. So I'll be damned. I'm going to die trying to do that.
Oh my God, I love that because you're taking something that you went through that, would be somebody's pain and you're making it as your purpose and you're doing something beautiful out of it. That's
Have
amazing
to do
for
something with it.
you.
They
Yes.
say in the UK, you can either laugh or you can cry. And you know what? I get a lot of a joy out of, I get a lot of humor, a lot of dark humor from everything I've been through. I'm very honest. I'm very open. And, sometimes people ask me, if you could change that childhood trauma you had, or you can change this, would you change it? And it may sound sick or a little perverted, but actually I wouldn't,
I wouldn't
because
either.
it's
Mhm.
made me who I am today. It's
Yeah.
made, if I didn't go through that trauma, I sure as hell wouldn't have started having children at 18. My whole life the trajectory would be completely different. And I'm happy where I'm at now. And so I'm happy with what's written for me. And I've come to terms with that now. It's took me 40 years. And, for them 40 years, I've been in psych wards at times, I've been through hard times, but I'm here. And for the last 10 years, I've found my authentic self and I'm so happy.
Right, that's awesome. And yeah, and I think it's the fact that even for me too, I'm allowing myself to speak without putting a filter on it. And I think that attracts people because you're just being yourself.
Mm,
And it's crazy how rare that can be in
yeah.
society, but I think that's beautiful. So, what does it actually mean to be AuDHD and what is AuDHD?
Okay, so AuDHD is not actually a clinical term, and I'm not a clinical person.
Okay.
I do have some qualifications in therapy and lots of bits and pieces and lots of lived experience. But I've never, I don't coin myself as clinical because I feel like there's a lot of clinical people out there, and if you want to find clinical answers, you look on Google and you find that. But I don't find people that I can relate to that are giving that advice. So I wanted to be a personal person that is down to earth, and I can give people advice from a kind of clinical perspective. Like, I can tell them the facts, but I can also just be very honest and very open. And people come to me and they ask me questions that they may be not comfortable asking a clinician. So that's where I've tried to point myself. So ADHD and autism is, and that's what ADHD is. It's not a clinical term, it's something we've put together. But it's autism, where, if you know what autism is, it's basically where your brain is a different neurotype. So there's the neurotypical neurotype and then there's the neurodiverse neurotype. Mine works different to your average neurotype, apparently, but who's to say that I don't have the right neurotype and the other people don't? Um, I need, the autism side of me needs structure, routine, quietness, freaks out when the light, and this isn't all neurodivergent persons. Once you've met one neurodivergent person, you've met one neurodivergent person. We are all different. It's like meeting someone from a different culture. We're all completely different. But for me, that's what my autism needs. So it's like an old man that wants to stay at home with his pipe and slippers and read the newspaper under a heated blanket. And then I've got this other side, which is like an it's an ADHD side. So that's that's ADHD, autism and ADHD together. So the ADHD is, I would describe her as a drunk teenager. She wants to spend all the money. She likes novelty. She likes, doing things that are new and spontaneous. But of course, her friend, also with the pipe and slippers, doesn't like doing that. So in my head, I am facing trauma every day because one side of me really needs that stability, or I get into meltdown mode. But then there's this one side, it almost sounds like schizophrenia or bipolar or something, but it's not. It's just the two
Mm.
combinations of neurotypes together, and they're really traumatic. And recently, we know a lot of autistic people, we know a lot of people with ADHD, but actually they sometimes come in hand, and that's what we're now coining ADHD. And they come with a whole new thing, because if you're just autistic, you just like this, you just like that. If you're just ADHD, you're just one way. But when you're the two neurotypes together, It's a mind fuck.
So it's basically having that balance, and basically you're just trying to maintain the balance to keep,
Yeah.
right? That's what it sounds like. It's a lot about balancing.
It's so hard because both of them people were in me innately, and they both crave them things, and it takes us a lot of years to find that balance. And
Mm,
and we can't find that balance if we don't know what is wrong with us, in the first
right.
place. So all these years I thought that my neurodivergence wasn't neurodivergence. I thought it was trauma. Now we're having a lot of 40-year olds and around that age that are finding out actually it isn't trauma, it's neurodivergence. And the thing that I'm really passionate about is language. So all my life, whether meaning to or not, I've been known as lazy Ellie, Ellie that can't do this, or Ellie that struggles with this, or bad connotation words.
Mm,
Actually, in my later life, I found out it's not a lazy Ellie. It's actually Ellie that struggles with executive dysfunction, and Ellie that struggles with RSD, and Ellie that struggles with this. I've been able to find that language. So I've took them things, what people thought were so negative. I actually know what's wrong with me now. I know, strategies to combat them. And I want everyone else to have that toolbox. And I specifically want everyone to have that toolbox for their children. Because when I had my children and I kept seeing them doing traits that I would do, I kept saying, no, 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 don't do that. Because I didn't want them to be like me. I didn't want them to have the trouble that I've
mm,
had. I wish I'd knew from the beginning so I could give them the right strategies. So I'm really,
mm,
really passionate about teaching parents, if you've got an AuDHD child, don't try and take them traits out of them. What you need
right.
to do is you need to know that these are really good traits, but you need to channel them. Your child might have a hyper focus. It might be guitar. Okay, they might not get a proper job, what we call a proper job working for the system one day, but you teach them everything about guitar, how to fix guitar, how to play guitar, and then they can be a luthier. You need to, a luthier is a guitar fixer and a specialist.
Oh,
So, you need to make that life for your child and for you. But if you don't know you're neurodivergent, you're just fighting in the dark.
oh, right. Yes. So you talk about masking. So what
Mm.
does masking really look like, and why is it so exhausting?
So I didn't even realize I was masking. And masking is what people, and not all people, obviously, I say that with everything, that's the caveat. People that have gone through trauma and people that are neurodivergent, both autistic and ADHD, they tend to mask. So because your neurodivergent child at school gets 20% more criticism than a neurotypical
Mm,
child, whether it's directed at them or whether it's just something that comes from being around doing something wrong. They experience 20%. It is actually a stat more criticism than your neurotypical child. So basically, what the neurodiverse child is very clever. What they do all their life is try and mirror everybody around them that's getting it right. So if I was around, a group of girls that were, cool and, everything, I would do it badly, but I would try and take off their mannerisms, their language, their everything. And I would do that with everything to the point was where I grew up, I had a lot of Nigerian friends. When I was around my Nigerian friends, I became Nigerian. I would mask absolute, and it's what made me survive because if I didn't mask and I was my true, authentic self,
mm,
I might not have done so well in life, but now I've been able to unmask and I'm being able to be me. But that sometimes is hard because you don't know who you was before the mask. The other day I was eating sushi and I was like, this is a really odd thing for me to like. I don't think I really like it. And then I realized that there was a phase once where everyone was like, "Oh, have matcha and sushi," and I just thought that that was cool, and I kidded
mm,
myself into liking it. So it's not, you don't know what's the mask and what's not. And when you realize you're neurodivergent, you then you can start being comfortable and taking off the mask and exploring who you was before you
mm.
started copying everyone else. And it's a journey. And it's a lifelong journey. People say to me, oh, I figure it out. I'm neurodivergent. Now I can take the mask off. How long is this going to take till I find myself? I don't think you'll ever find yourself, but we're all, as long as you get on the bus, you board the bus for the journey, then we're going in the right direction.
Oh, wow. Okay. Masking. Okay. Um, so what emotions came up when you finally received your diagnosis? Did you have a lot of emotions?
Yes.
Okay.
Um, and this is the same for a lot of people. Relief, because you're like,
Oh,
shit, oh my God, there wasn't anything wrong with me. I was just a
right.
little different, but I had a different brain type, but it wasn't substandard. It was, it was great. But we should have known how to work it. So there's that grief and relief and and regret, and also sometimes a little anger, because I sometimes think, if my parents have known that I was neurodivergent, they may have made, accommodations for me, and that they would have made for
Mm,
any other disabled person, but
mhm.
because I didn't seem neurodivergent, I never had them accommodations made for me, and I should have had them made for me. and
Right.
and I think that some neurodivergent people, when they find out they're neurodivergent later in life, they feel like that. They're like, oh shit, I've got to 40, 50, 60, and I feel like I've been failed, and now I'm having to start all over again from scratch, and I don't have all that time all over again. So I think for a lot of people, it brings up a lot of emotions, but relief and grief and most
Mm.
certainly validation.
Oh, right. Yes. So, can somebody spend years trying to heal trauma without realizing they're neurodivergent?
I think
So, like,
so. I don't think everyone also gets a diagnosis for neurodivergence. So
mm,
it's all well and good saying, oh, I go and get my diagnosis for neurodivergence. But actually, the diagnostic process here for neurodivergence, you'd have to get autism and ADHD separately. And together, that's about £3,500. It's long. And also,
whoa.
it's a big, long process of filling out forms. If you know neurodivergent people, specifically people with ADHD, filling out forms is not our forte. And, so some people get halfway through the process and then they have to start all over again because they lose the forms or they lose the will to live filling out the forms. It's a long, long process. So sometimes I don't think it's always that easy to say when you get your diagnosis of neurodivergence, because a lot of neurodivergent people I know are self-diagnosed because they don't have the option to be diagnosed because it's so expensive. So sometimes it's even self-diagnosis, but once I feel like if you have the right tools around you, that's when you can start implementing the right strategies and getting your confidence back that you maybe never had. But you need to start somewhere, and that's why I make a community, because I feel like there's clinical advice from doctors, or there's
Mm,
advice from coaches and therapists, and that's like, I don't know, $90 an hour, or something crazy. It's not accessible when you go and see a middle-aged white woman, just a generic person, and not everyone relates to that. Not
mhm.
everyone wants, so and the person that you might see might not be neurodivergent, and they might not know, have that lived experience. So sometimes people want to see, me or someone like me or someone like them sitting down, being honest and shooting the shit with them, and just talking about what's real. I would rather speak to someone more normal than go and talk to someone to give me clinical advice.
Mm,
And also, our thing that we offer is we offer a lot of free services. We have free podcasts, free support groups, free everything. We try and do everything free,
right.
but we also have a subscription which is $1.35 a month, where you get lots of one-on-one things out of it. You get a lot of resources sent to you, a lot of books that we normally sell in the shops that are like $20, but we want to make it so accessible to everyone, because the thing is with
Mm,
neurodivergent people, some are wickedly successful. We've took our
mm,
gifts and we've channeled them, and we're working at Silicon Valley and all that crazy stuff, right? But some of us haven't been able to channel them, and we've had a life where we haven't been able to work and we haven't got a lot of money. So
mm,
I feel like it should be accessible to everyone, because not everyone can afford coaching, not everyone can afford everything. So that's why we make ours either free, or our main package is $1.35 a month, which is £1 English money, because we're so passionate about making it inclusive.
right. I love that. That's really awesome, and that's truly making a difference in this world.
I hope so.
Yes. So, what are some signs that someone may be in a relationship where their neurodivergence is being exploited rather than supported?
So if you didn't, so when I was in relationships, I never knew about neurodivergence, and I didn't know I was neurodivergent. I just knew that if I met someone like a man, and I've had three serious partners in my whole entire life, they're long relationships. I overcommit because once I'm in it, I'm in it, and I will stay with you like a loyal dog, which is my issue. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't have a standard. I think, you know what, I'm so rubbish. All my life I've been told I'm so rubbish and I'm not really good at anything. So I can find a man that isn't very good and he's not going to offer me anything, but I'm going to fix him to be good. So what I will do is I'll think that my standard's not high. I won't expect someone that's going to take me out on a date and treat me well. I will have to attract them a broken person or a bad person, and then I can hopefully fix them and make them fall in love with me. And a lot of people I'm meeting are having the same story because of that 20% more criticism that they've experienced as a child, whether they're man, woman, non-binary. They have so low self-worth, so they are drawn into relationships with people that want to, not always, but sometimes they're drawn into relationships with people that would happily take advantage of them because they don't have standards. They're happy to accept whatever they can get because they haven't always got the best treatment. And it's really hard for us to so we get not all of us, but we get really attached to things very easily. We don't like change, and sometimes we can't see what is right and what is wrong, so we have other different vulnerabilities that people can exploit, whether they're meaning to or not meaning to. But for me, the self-worth thing was that I think that's why I don't know if my daughter's neurodivergent or not. I have a daughter, she's 9, but what I do is I try and pump her with so much self-confidence so that when she meets someone when she's older and they say, okay, I'm going to give you the minimum, she's going to go, see you later, you're not for me. Where if someone would have said to me, I'm going to give you the minimum, I would have said, oh, thank you so much, I love that. So I think that seems to be a recurring theme for neurodivergent men, women, and non-binary that I've met along the years, unfortunately.
And I think that's beautiful that you're starting to build her self-confidence because
Yeah.
also it starts at home, at least from what I've experienced, because I didn't have high self-worth for myself because in my childhood home, I was constantly, it was just, I was constantly criticized. My mother
Yeah.
was my own worst enemy. And so I, found the first person that would treat me like her because that's what I thought love was.
Yeah.
However,
So
it
that's,
was,
we try and emulate what we think is normal. So I try to emulate what my parents were. But the thing is, you know what? Parenting doesn't come with a manual. And I have to
Mhm.
say this because when I had my older children that were all born male, they're all in their 20s now. When I had them, I wasn't the best mother. I criticized them because I didn't want them to be like I was. So every time I saw one of the traits that I was doing, I'd say, stop that, it's stupid. So even without knowingly doing it, I done it to my own set of children, for years. I criticized them, and but out of
Mhm.
love, because I didn't want them to make the same
Right.
mistakes I have. But of course it affected their self-worth. And that's something
Mhm.
I try and make up for majorly. But that's why I don't want anyone else to stay awake at 4:30 in the morning and beat themselves up about criticizing their children. I want to teach them mums, actually, it's neurodivergence, this is how we build it. You don't have to smack it out of your children or shout it out of your children, or I don't want any other mum to feel like I feel, because I feel like I failed my older kids. I should have
Mhm.
gave them extra accommodations. And now I don't want any other mother to feel like that. They're great, they're amazing, they're having a lovely life, but I could have done better, and I want everyone else to have them tools to be able to do better.
Aw. Well, I mean, at the time you were doing the best that you could, and you
And
thought you
very
were
young,
helping. Yeah,
very traumatized,
yeah,
very confused. But that's why I never ever want anyone else to go through that, and that's part of my passion.
right. So you've built an incredible community of over 50,000 people. So what do you hear over and over again from neurodivergent individuals? Is there something you hear a lot from them or from the
Wow.
community?
Wow, I thought it was just me. I thought I was alone in this
Uh,
world. I thought I was a weirdo. I thought I was a creep. A lot of people talk. There's this
oh,
song, "I'm a creep, I'm a weirdo," and for some reason, neurodivergent people seem to really like that song. They seem to have related to it over the years. Um, So I hear a lot of the same stuff being repeated
Mm,
again and again from people every day, like, oh my God, it's not just me. I feel so validated. I spent my whole childhood making up imaginary friends because they were the only ones that would accept me for my weird, quirky ways. Or I spent my whole life exhausted because I tried to mask who I was inside. So I'm just meeting a lot of
mm,
people now that have had traumatic times that are now like, let's heal. But, there's so much damage that's already been done. And, it's fixable, but it's a slow process. But I am hearing the same thing repeated by everyone. It's just a relief to know actually it's not just me. And that's beautiful. I've met so many people that are just, and they're amazing people. Do you know what the thing about neurodivergent people that have been through trauma, is they are less judgmental generally. As I always say, caveat, once you've met one person, I can't say it for everyone, but generally we have a justice thing. So I meet a lot of people that are neurodivergent and they have a very high justice thing, and they really like
mm.
into justice. They want everything to be just for everyone. They can't take injustice. So everyone that I've met that, the majority of the people that I've met that neurodivergent in later life are just kind people that just want to find their place in the world, and I want to help them do that.
That's beautiful. So you openly talk about addiction. So
Yeah.
looking back now, do you think addiction was connected to trying to regulate a nervous system that felt overwhelmed?
100%. So I was dead against, I had like this justice thing, and I was dead against alcohol and drugs until I was in my 20s. I hated alcohol and drugs because I felt like it would cause pain. It would, because
Yeah.
addiction comes from it. That's what I saw. I'm very black and white thinking. So I was dead against drugs and alcohol. Um, and then everyone around me, because of course I attracted another type of person, everyone around me was doing drugs. So for the first 10 years, I wouldn't do it. And then I thought, do you know what? I want to try and I want to see what the big deal is. So I tried drugs and alcohol. And at one point, I thought that it was sent from God for me because it helped me unmask. It gave me confidence that I never had before. It made me able to socialize and talk with people. And I'd never, I mean, I
Mhm.
was still weird and I still didn't fit in, but it helped me with that. And I was really happy at first, but then until you're not, with any drug addiction and anything, that's what happens. And it people that have gone through trauma or people with ADHD, they tend to have kind of addictive personalities. You can't go halfway, you
Mhm.
you go full way. So sometimes we are more susceptible to addiction because of that. We are more susceptible to addiction because of trauma. It just makes a whole lot of susceptibility. Quite a lot of people, I've done a lot of charity work in my time, and quite a lot of people that I've met that have been in unfortunate situations because of addiction, I would say, and I don't have the right to say, but they've either been diagnosed with some kind of neurodivergence or trauma, or they tell me they think they are. So it is a massive correlation that we can't fight. Drug addiction, abuse, neurodivergence, that is connected somehow.
Mm. So what practices help you regulate your nervous system the most?
I don't know. I think allowing myself now to be. So I do podcasts a lot. I guest on a lot of podcasts now, and I have podcasts in America that I guest on. So for example, the other day I was on a podcast in America, and it was at 11 o'clock my time because it was the only time the American people could do. So it
Yeah.
was like, early evening your time. Um, and I went on the podcast and I said, I'm so sorry, I can't turn the light on. I said, because in my I think part of my autism, I think, is I can't take bright lights. They make me feel like, even talking about them, they make me feel ill. Okay. I just
Mm.
can't bear them. It's like a sensory overload for me.
Oh.
So when I went on the podcast the other night, I said, I know it's uncomfortable, but I'm going to have to sit semi in the dark. You know what? That's made a difference to my nervous system is the fact now I can advocate for myself.
Mm.
Before, I would have been so embarrassed to say, you know what, I'm going to have to sit in the dark. And I would have said, I'm a freak. I have to sit in the dark. But now I'm like, no, I don't like nights. I'm neurodivergent. You want to talk to me, you know, then you're going to sit in the dark with me. And they were so great about it. But
Oh.
giving myself them accommodations and knowing, if I go to a social situation, which I sometimes do, knowing that I can take my own car and leave there, because I'm going to be burnt out in a couple of hours and I'm not going to force myself to stay and talk to everyone. Just giving myself so many accommodations and forgiving myself for that is made a humongous difference. I mean, my nervous system's still buggered. I'm always going to be a little bit of a nervous system person, but it's helped so much.
I think that's beautiful. Yeah. So basically you're owning it. Like
Yeah.
yeah, and it's okay to speak up for yourself and to say what you need.
That's
Like,
why I started calling myself Ellie AuDHD. So I've always been Ellie who can't make eye contact, or Ellie that talks too much, or Ellie that butts in, because so ADHD is a thing where you have a thought in your head, you're so passionate about it, and you have to get it out straight away. So it's not because don't mean to butt in, it's just it's something that happens. So I've always been called that. And then when I started up my new Facebook in May, I thought, what can I call myself? I'm not a very sociable person. I didn't want my school friends to find me and stuff like that. And I thought, as a joke, I'm going to call myself Ellie AuDHD, because all my life I've been called Ellie this, Ellie that, and I'm just going to own it. And you know what? I'm so glad I done that, because now when I meet people, I'm like, I'm AuDHD, and that's going to explain everything. I don't need to explain, oh, I'm so sorry I butt in. Oh, I'm so sorry I do this. Now I'm like, I'm AuDHD and it comes with quirks. I'm sorry, but I just have to be me.
exactly, just be you. So what's the biggest misconception that people have about autism?
I have to be tactful, because I know what a lot of people think and I don't want to project that onto the
Mm,
world. But a lot of people think that if you've got autism, that you also could have a learning difficulty, which of course is true. Everything can come with a learning difficulty,
right.
but if you've got autism, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a learning difficulty. I am of average intelligence. It also, a lot of people think if you've got autism you don't have empathy. I am empathetic to
Mm,
my own detriment. I spend my life doing activism at rallies, at things like that. I am the most empathetic person, and that's why I've got myself in all of these situations over the years. So being autistic doesn't mean that you lack empathy. People say to me, oh, you're autistic. You don't look autistic. And I'm like, but what does autistic look like? People,
yeah.
I think people have a misconception of autism. And, my dad, we've now found out in later life, he's 80 and he's found out he's neurodivergent, and because of the work that I do. Now, at first, he found that quite offensive, because in his day and age, you were taught that that means that you have a disability, and having a disability isn't a good thing. And that's an offensive thing for someone to tell you. And now we know actually it's not an offensive thing to have a disability or have autism. It just means that you have a different neurotype. And if you know how to manage that, then you can freaking thrive.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it could be your superpower, just
Yeah.
embrace it and allow it just to be you and own
Yeah.
it.
I mean, and it does come with a lot of shit things. It really does. I have a, a lot of people say superpower, and I agree. In some points, it can be a superpower, but don't get me wrong, it's not easy. Superpower. It's caused me so much hardship. But if you can help your
Mm,
kids channel these things from young, then you're doing the best thing that you can possibly do for them.
right. Yeah. So what are some things that parents can do to help their children develop healthy boundaries and recognize unsafe situations?
Okay, so that is a thing that I think is really important with neurodivergence. So if you're neurodivergent, even if your parents aren't criticizing you, school maybe, just not being able to do things like everyone else, that criticism still drips in.
Mm,
So when we go about our everyday life as children, especially, I feel like we're more susceptible to abuse. If someone comes up to us and says, I've got a secret, but I'm trusting just you with it, because you're special and you're good, and you see where I'm going with this. This
mm,
makes you very susceptible. So I feel like the most important thing we can do as parents is make sure our children are validated in every way, shape, or form. Make sure and it's not easy to do. I've been a stressed out mum who shouted at my kids constantly at times, but I think that that's really important. And when you have a neurodivergent child, you need to know that they're more susceptible to childhood abuse and adult abuse. So you need to make them accommodations where you're telling them that they're great. You're also telling them, because sometimes we're a stickler for rules when you're neurodivergent. So if someone says, don't break a secret, you must never break a promise, and we're like, okay, that's not something we'll do. You need to make it clear that you don't have secrets from your mum, you don't have secrets from your dad, and
Mm.
you need to find other neurodivergent adults, follow them on the internet, or get advice. There's no excuses anymore. I know there's an excuses that you're busy, because I know it's busy being a parent. I was a busy parent to 3 kids under 5, and I'm pretty sure they were all neurodivergent. My life was hectic, but if I had time again, I would tell every single parent, don't make yourself too busy. Just take a little bit of time to research that neurodivergence so that you can make that life easier for your kid. I know it's easier said than done. It's life's hard. It gets busy. I don't even have time
Mm.
to do anything for myself. But if you can do one thing, just do that for your children, because it will minimize their risks to a lot of things throughout their lives.
Okay. So, what does reclaiming your power look like for someone who's neurodivergent? Is it, like you said, kind of owning it? Is that kind of what
Yeah.
you think it would be?
I think owning it, advocating for yourself.
Mhm.
I think a lot of people I've met recently say inner child work, and I feel like I have I'm sticking up for my inner child. I'm finding a lot of my inner children out there, and I'm helping them. I'm helping, I'm helping other parents to help their children the way that I wish that I could have helped my children at the time. And that is what I think is taking back my power. I, I'm now
Mm.
I'm now able to recognize what was wrong, I say in inverted commas, with me all along. And now I use it as something that, my hyper focus is ADHD and autism, and I've made a career out of that. I'm now doing everything I can to take back my power and teach other people that neurodivergence doesn't, yes, it is a disability, and yes, it's bloody hard a lot of the time, but you can do things with it. You can do as much as anyone else, but you need to learn the other skill set that they're not going to show you at school, because school isn't necessarily geared up for neurodivergent children. So you're going to have to
Right.
find your own way and your own strategies. When I was at school, I was in a class of fish, and I was being taught to be a fish by a teacher that was a fish, and I could never swim. And every time I went near the water, I would freak out, and I would be like, Ellie, what's wrong with you? Why are you so weird? Why can't you be a fish? It's only when I left school, after all the criticism had dripped in my mind, that I realized, oh my God, I couldn't be a fish because I'm not a fish. you know
Right.
and we're sending our children sometimes neurodivergent to school, and every day they're being asked to be fish, and unfortunately they will never be fish. And so you need to make sure that you're sending them to somewhere that is going to embrace the fact that they're not a fish, and they're going to come with other strategies that aren't just for fishes.
Right. And do you think even neurodivergence and autism are related to trauma? Like, is there a strong correlation? At
No,
least,
no. So I think, and again, I'm not a clinician or anything. I think that you
yeah.
are born with neurodivergence. I know I inherited it probably from my dad. He inherited it probably
Mhm.
from his parents. There's a strong neurodivergent gene in my family. So I don't think it's nothing that you can catch. It's nothing
Right.
that you get from, smacking your head on something or something. It isn't like that. And that's a fair question, because I think that not a lot of people know. It's something that you're born with, and it's innately in you. You can't learn it, although at first I did think maybe this was just learnt behavior from my dad that had rubbed off on me, nature and
Yeah.
nurture. But no, you can't catch neurodivergence, but it definitely can make you more susceptible to trauma, 100%. so
Oh,
so not the other way around. So you have to be born with the neurodivergence, but it makes you more susceptible to trauma. Not always,
okay.
but a lot.
That makes sense now. The more that and this is something I'm learning too, and I love having you on
So
because,
glad.
I want to learn more about it. But yeah, because you
Mhm.
said neurodivergence, they get attached easily. So they have a
Yeah.
hard time setting boundaries. So that makes sense
So
why.
many, so many. That's just one of them. But yes,
Mm,
so many different reasons, and not always.
yeah,
Some neurodivergent people might go through life and they might have the best time. I'm
right,
just speaking from a lot that I meet.
right. So if listeners remember just one thing from today's conversation, what do you hope it is?
I still have ADHD. So when you put me on the spot, I don't
No,
fucking know.
yeah.
I'm
So it's
only joking.
okay.
I say
Just
everything in jest. You know what? I am like the most light-hearted person ever. I just feel like you need to forgive yourself. You're gonna have
yeah.
experienced a lot of criticism, even though the people around you didn't mean to. You didn't
Mm,
always work like the fishes, and that causes a lot of stuff to go on inside you. So now I feel like find your tribe. I think finding your tribe matters. And some neurodivergent people don't like to be social. I'm not a very sociable person, but just knowing that there are people there that are like me, and it's not just me that I've felt like all my life, makes a huge difference. So find other neurodivergent people. You don't have to ring them up and speak to them on the phone. If you rang me, I'd have a heart attack. I don't like speaking on the phone. I'm not that person. But just find people that validate you, so it's not just
mm,
you and you're not alone.
right. So where can people learn more about you, your podcast, and your work?
So I have a website which is www.ellie, and on that has links to my podcast. It has links to our support group, our free support group. It has links to absolutely everything, even my Spotify list. Like, you go on there and you'll find absolutely everything. It's all in one place, because I know for neurodivergent people, a lot of information is too much information. So I just like to make it very simple. You will find everything there, and you can click on it and you can go to anything else. I might not be the person for you. Like, I'm sweary, I'm down to earth, I'm very honest. But if you come to me and you say, Ellie, I want to learn more about neurodivergence, but you're not the kind of person, and that's fine. I can point you in the direction of 25 other
Mm,
people that could be more geared up to you. I have a friend, and she's very quiet and very knowledgeable, and a lot of people prefer her. She's my business partner because she's more manageable. It's just we're all different, and I don't ever take offense to that. I will find you someone that will be the way you want them to be, if that's going to help. So I can always point you in a different direction.
right. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on and just sharing all your knowledge about this. I really do
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. I don't know if it's knowledge. Some people might disagree. I do have a lot of knowledge, but it's my hyper focus and I like to research. But it's mostly lived experience, and I don't want anyone to feel like that.
Mm.
So I appreciate you for letting me come on and speak about it, because so many people neurodivergent, they don't even know. Someone might be sitting here listening to this and think, fuck. You never know. So
Y-
thank you so much.
Right. Yeah. I think I might be neurodivergent and I never even realized it because a lot of it explains me, like
Yeah.
just different. And, so yeah. So definitely
Yeah.
open up my eyes for
Yeah.
sure. So,
Thank
but
you
once
so
again,
much.
thank you again. So
Oh,
thank,
honestly, thank you.
yeah. So thank you so much for listening to the Kelly Healing Project. Remember, healing is not about becoming somebody new. It's about reconnecting with who you truly are, healing the past, empowering your future. If you'd like to connect further with me, you can visit me at thekellyhealingproject.com. I'll see you next time.